Hey everybody, it's Chris Harrison here with the Main Points Podcast. Today we are talking with Shane Brandel. He is the Chief of Police for the Decatur Police Department here in Decatur, Illinois. I'm really excited to hear about how the law enforcement community feels about the Decatur community and where the Decatur community is heading. And also, I want to dig into the heart of what drives the police officers, firemen, anyone that's involved in social service. The Chief of Decatur Police Department, Shane Brandel.
Yep.
So did I say that right?
Yep. Yes, you did.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be here.
Awesome. So here at the Main Points Podcast, we're really here to help celebrate all that's great about Decatur. We want to educate the community about what's happening, and we're going to elevate certain programs, people, other things that are happening within the area too. So we really thank you for taking time out of your schedule for this.
Happy I can do it.
One of the things, kind of the genesis, and I want you to know this too, of where this podcast came from is, and within the last few years, I noticed there's a lot of new people coming to Decatur, new from across the United States, across the globe too. There's a lot of different languages being spoken, certainly a lot of different backgrounds, religion, traditions. And I saw this as a way to, how do we open up the inside of Decatur and help those people understand who we are? And so I think really having the police department here is really going to be opening up the police department to even people that are from Decatur too. So
fantastic.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit, I guess, kind of background. How'd you get to Decatur? And certainly you've been with the Decatur Police Department your entire professional career. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've been in Decatur. I'm coming up on 28 years. So I grew up in a small town north of Bloomington called El Paso. That's where I wouldn't say born and raised. I was actually born in Virginia. My dad was in the Marine Corps, and so I was born out there. And then we came back to where my mom's family is from.
Okay.
And my dad's actually from Omaha, Nebraska, and they ultimately settled back here in Illinois with my mom's family, and that's kind of where I was brought up.
Okay.
And so I graduated high school, and I went to college at Western Illinois University, and I knew that I wanted to be a police officer probably since I was 15 years old.
Interesting.
I had some law enforcement in my family. My dad was a Bloomington firefighter at the time.
So your dad was the Marines too, right?
Yeah, he was. And,
okay.
And once he got out of the Marine Corps, and they came back. But
okay.
My parents divorced when I was young, and so he lived in Bloomington, and my mom lived in El Paso. And so my stepdad was actually the chief of police in El Paso. So that kind of, helped form me a bit. I had some other relatives, cousins that were in law enforcement in Bloomington, McLean County Sheriff's Department, Woodford County Sheriff's Department. So I had a lot of that law enforcement influence. And so that was the path that I chose for a career. And really, I don't, other than your silly childhood stuff that, you want to be an astronaut and things like that.
Right. Or a cowboy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I never really had any thoughts of doing anything else. So, back in that time, you're talking the mid-'90s, that getting into law enforcement was a challenge. There would be, hundreds of people for 10 jobs trying to get those jobs. And so, after my junior year of college, I started doing the testing thing, just like everybody then. And I tested, all around and some places here in Illinois, outside of Illinois, including actually Los Angeles PD. I had three of my fraternity brothers were LAPD cops. So I'm like, well, might as well go out to Los Angeles and
go hang out with my buddies again.
Yeah. So I went out there and, so I went the whole testing process, and I graduated college in December of 96. I had gotten then an offer from Decatur Police Department. They were the first ones to give me an offer. And honestly, back then it was, you take that first offer because it's a challenge to get these jobs. And as I mentioned, you're with Decatur, I think there was 500-600 people testing for what ended up being a list of 20.
Wow.
And that was common. I was always testing against, 1,000 people or something like that, and for these jobs. So I got hired in April of 1997, and I've been here ever since. And so I was such a grand old age of 21 when I got hired, and
wow.
So I was a kid. And it's funny because, at the time I thought, and I know that was always a challenge and a question for somebody of that age when they're trying to get in this profession of, are you really ready for this? Are you mature enough yet? Have you lived enough life and things like that? And so, and that was always a question faced to me or given to me when I was doing interview stuff. At the time, I didn't understand it. And well, now obviously, as I'm 49 years old, I do understand that, right? And especially as I've been a supervisor and a leader in the department for a long time, I understand that, where they were going with that. And I really felt that it took me a few years to grow up enough. And, that doesn't, not in a negative way, but, I was from a small town and then I come to a bigger city and I don't have a clue.
Well, and yeah, you're 21 years old,
Yeah.
and are you ready? Are you mature? No.
No. Yeah, the
But
answer to
how
that
do
is
you-
absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. But how do you get ready?
Yeah.
And I think that's, one of the things we were talking about off air actually was kind of the training for
Mm-hmm.
people to actually become a police officer, to be, I think, deployable is what you
Yeah.
said. It's 8 to 9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
And they're still pretty green, right?
Right. Yeah. And so it was an interesting thing for me. I get out of the academy in June, and I think it was late June, and then we Decatur does some in-service training, and I had just turned 22 years old when we finished that in-service training, and my first shift is something that I'll just never forget, and it's funny because there's so much I've forgotten over the course of my career. People will talk about something that I was apparently present at, and I have no recollection of it, but and my first shift, I meet with my FTO and my field training officer and my sergeant at the time. We have our typical chat. I hit the street about 4:00, and at 4:30 we're in a foot chase. And I'm like, this is it. I'm in. I love this, and I've never looked back. And there was some. I was 22 years old. There was some growing up to do there.
Sure.
A lot of life learning to do. You think you know everything at that age, and it's funny because I have twin daughters, and they're 22 years old now, and I look at them and I'm like, I cannot believe I was a police officer at 22 years old, looking back on all that, because there's so much life to be learned and learning how to deal with people and communicate with people. And, some of it's trial by error. Some of it is your peers helping you with that. Some of it is watching your peers. Some of it's making mistakes, right?
That trial by error is a huge one too.
And some of it is, and I think the better ones, also own it in their own failures or mistakes, or areas where they need improvement. And because if you think you're the greatest thing out there, then you're not going to be very good in the long run, because you'll never improve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I felt that this was the right path for me, and that's what I went down. And the course of my career was, I couldn't have scripted it better. I'll run through it very quickly. But so now I've been with Decatur PD coming up on 28 years, and I started on second shift patrol like everybody. They start on the afternoon shifts and evenings. I was promoted into our street crimes unit, and then I was promoted into our adult investigations division and unit, which does everything from theft to homicide. And from there, I was promoted to sergeant, went back to patrol on the night shifts, and I did a short stint in administration as a sergeant. Couldn't stand that at that time. I was too young, and I wanted to be back in the business of policing and versus the administration. So I voluntarily went back to the back shifts and spent some more time there. And I will say, I'll hit a pause there, and I tell everybody this: probably the most enjoyable time of my career was when I was a supervisor, a sergeant on third shift, midnight shift. I absolutely loved it. I loved the action of it. I loved working with the combination of some experienced officers and new young officers that are there to learn. And I just really, really enjoyed it. And so
what was that like? I want to hit pause and dive in a little bit. Supervisor of third shift, you say you've got experienced people, you've got the newer people that want to learn.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes down to, these are people that this is in them. They live for this and they want to do this.
Yeah.
And the question, I think, to people a lot of times that are outside of, military, firefighter, law enforcement, it seems like it kind of runs in families,
Sure.
which certainly it has in yours. You hold to that. The question is, why? Like, what is it that makes you say, this is what I want to do with my life, putting your life on the line, with my time, with the heartache, and I'm sure the troubling things you go through. What is it that drives people to want to do this?
I think that's a unique or an individual question, right? And I mean, everybody always answers the question because that's your common interview question, right? And so what do you think they always answer? I want to help people.
Right.
That's a very simplistic answer to a much bigger, more complex idea, right? For me, I think it has always been about, I never wanted to do something where I didn't feel like what I did mattered, where what I did had an impact, And so for me, it's always been about, at the end of the day, do I realize what I did for a living matter in others' lives, in my life, in our community's life, our society? Did it matter? And so it gives purpose, right? And so I think that's what it is for most police officers. And what I'll tell you, I've found that those that I don't feel have that sense of purpose or meaning in why they are a police officer don't generally last. If they're there because they think it's a good paycheck or there's good benefits or it's a stable job,
it's a good career,
they will likely wash themselves out because there is a lot that goes into being a police officer physically, emotionally, the toll it takes on your body, the toll it takes on your mind, your relationships if you don't manage those right. There's a lot to it. There's a reason why police officers have such a high divorce rate, high alcoholism rate, high suicide rate. There's a reason for that. And so a lot of people will see that quickly and they're, okay, this is what I thought. It ain't about, I don't need the money, right?
Right. Okay.
So it generally is a dig deep down. Why am I doing this? I want to matter. I want my life to matter. And they see that as a way to do it. That's why you'll see a lot of people in the military transition right back into law enforcement or fire or something like that.
Right.
And we have a lot of former military in our ranks. So,
is it also fair to say a lot of them appreciate and respect the discipline and order and chain of command and process, and that's just how they live their lives, and to them they're not creative types that are, what am I going to do today? No, today I'm on shift and I'm doing this and I'm covering this street or holding this wall or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And yes, you will not find generally a lot of police officers that are in that artsy mindset, right?
Nothing wrong with artsy.
No, they're nothing. But
the world needs everybody.
Those kids in school that just didn't fit that normal mold, but you knew they were super smart and super talented in whatever it is that drove them, and so, you don't generally find a lot of that in law enforcement. We're very structured, very rigid, very disciplined. And those that don't or aren't that way oftentimes aren't successful in a paramilitary organization.
Right.
Because they don't like that structure.
Right.
They don't like that discipline.
Right.
They want that creativity or freedom, and there is no freedom and creativity in policing. It's very rigid lines.
Great. Interesting.
Well,
sorry to divert there, good. But so that was when you were supervisor of third shift.
On midnight. So I then went to be a supervisor on day shift patrol. That wasn't necessarily for me either. It was too slow. The dynamics, wasn't my thing. And then, so I then got an opportunity to go back into investigations as a supervisor there. And I spent I'm trying to think, maybe 4 years there as a supervisor over our detectives.
How long had you been in when you became supervisor of detectives? Because I would think that's where you really got to have some experience. You've seen some stuff yourself.
I think by then I was 14 years in.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Because that would have been 2011. So 14 years in.
Okay.
And so I did that for, I think, 4 years. And then I was promoted to lieutenant, which is one of our shift commander roles. I went back to midnight patrol. And then I wasn't long in that role, maybe a year, not even, I don't think, and I got moved into administration. I guess one of the negatives when you get into the lieutenant and above, we call that our management or our administration, is you lose control of your assignments and your shifts and all that. Whereas sergeant and below, you have a lot of control of where you want to be. And so I lost that control. So I moved to administration, not saying it. So at that time, It was better. It was more time for me. I think I had 19 years on at the time, and okay, time for me to slow down, time for me to take on that administrative role, because it's a very different mindset when you get into administration and you start dealing with, budgets, equipment acquisition, politics, and, stuff like that. Dealing with union contracts and whatnot. At that time, I had control over the dispatch center, so I was put in charge of kind of running that for a while and then overseeing the transition to what dispatch is today.
Are there people that can't or don't want to transition from the street and from the potential foot race tonight versus, go into administration because that's climbing the ranks?
Yeah.
Do some go, I'm good here, I want to keep doing this?
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that just they like what they're doing. They don't want the change. What I didn't add in a lot of that is a lot of times those assignments, you get change shifts, right? So a lot of people, especially if they get assigned a day shift, they never want to leave day shift. They don't want to go back to midnights or something like that. And I think that's unfortunate, because I know there's been in the course of my career, I've seen some talented people not promote up because they didn't want to lose that control, or they didn't want to lose that shift. For me, I will tell you how it has worked for me, and it's worked great for me and my family, is if I'm not happy at work, then I know I'm not going to be happy at home. I know I'm not going to be a good husband, a good father, a good friend. And so it's always worked well with my family and my wife and kids that, hey, if that's what you want to do, go do it. And I'm not the guy that likes to sit in one role for 20 years and do the same thing. I can't do that. That is not me. I would have went crazy, and that I wouldn't have happened. So, that's one great thing about the Decatur Police Department, is it's large enough where there's a lot of opportunities for you if you're willing to work to get it. And I say that to the new officers and talk to them about, your potential and your opportunities are limited by one thing, and that's you. So if you every day, if you are preparing for that next opportunity, then you'll get that opportunity. It's just a matter of time. There is no such thing as luck, right? Life is about when preparation meets opportunity. And so if you're every day preparing for that next opportunity, you'll get it. And that's kind of how I've lived my life and done my career. But so, I was lieutenant for a year, and then I got promoted to deputy chief. I was deputy chief over administration for a couple of years, and then I got moved deputy chief over patrol. And then in July of 21, I was promoted to chief when our former chief retired. And so I think I've counted it up before. In 27 years, I've had 13 different assignments. And and so what I would say is that it makes me kind of that jack of all trades and a master of none. And the beauty of it for me is it's always been to where I can have the conversation with pretty much any division in our department and know exactly what's going on. And I can also call BS on certain things that I may hear. So they don't always like that. Hey, the chief knows about what I'm talking about here. And I can say, yeah, no, I don't like that. And don't blow smoke at me. I know how this goes. And so there's only been one division in our department that I haven't worked, and that's juvenile. And that was by choice. I never did want to work in juvenile.
Gotcha.
I've worked enough juvenile cases obliquely just in investigations where you have homicides of juveniles or of infants, and it's like there's no way I can make that a career. So I knew my weakness, and I just avoided that one. And I wouldn't even call that a weakness. I would call that is my no-go zone. So
sure. They sometimes say avoidance, and that's just somewhere you were just like, no, I'm not going there.
I did it when I had to, but I didn't want to make a career out of that.
For sure. How do you, switching a little bit, I guess, from the structure of the police department and law enforcement in general, how do you, as a father, a husband, a community member, view Decatur and Macon County? Like, what has it done for you and your family? And I know you moved around a little bit of DeWitt County and Macon County and Decatur, but the show here is about Decatur, and what does that mean to you?
So I've said this many a times, and I 100% believe this. I grew up in a small town, and it's different vibe when you grow up in a small town. And I'm not talking a small town that is, adjacent to a larger city like Forsyth is to Decatur.
Right.
I'm talking you're 15 miles, 20 miles from any other larger city, right?
To the grocery store.
Yeah. And so, we had a small grocery store. And so anytime you ever wanted to go shopping, you had to go into Bloomington or Peoria or something like that. And, but there is a, interesting sense of value and community within those small towns that especially as I've gotten older, I've deeply appreciated. What I've always said about Decatur is I've always felt Decatur feels to me like a big, small town, where I do truly feel that you have a lot of that sense of community and where anybody will help the next person out. There is an interesting mixture of social classes within Decatur that that is, if you don't know it, you wouldn't know that guy's a multimillionaire, or you go to a restaurant and I may know this person's struggling to pay their bills and this guy, has more money than he'll ever need in his life. And we're all sitting there eating at the same restaurant. And a lot of communities, you don't see that. So the blending of that and the ability to experience kind of each other, has always been interesting to me about Decatur. The blue collar roots of it. My grandfather was a retired guy from Caterpillar. My dad, before he was a firefighter, worked 10 years at Firestone. And so that big blue collar factory union type work was always kind of built into me. And work ethic in general. A story I'll tell about my grandfather is, and I've built this into my kids today, is you're never late. Don't ever be late.
Right.
And if you are on time, you're late. If you want to be on time, you better be early. And so it's, my friends actually make fun of me to this day about that of, okay, if we're telling Shane to be here at 2, he's going to be here at 1:30 or 1:45. So if we don't want him here till 2, tell him 2:30. And so
you're the guy that shows up early to the party.
Exactly.
Like, we're not ready yet.
I do. And it's funny. And I still do that to this day. And on certain things that I know that I should show up late, but I just inherently can't do it. And so I've seen that in Decatur too, just that hard work ethic from, people in general. And again, their just willingness to help each other, especially when it's really appropriate and necessary.
But I'm in real estate now. Before that, I was in banking, and I had a bank president that was actually in this building that we're recording, at Regions Bank. And he had moved from Indianapolis, and he said, Decatur, he said, it's just different. He said, it's the blue collar. He's like, I got people showing up in the office at 7:30 to start the day at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And he goes, in Indianapolis, they're rolling in at 9:30.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to me too, because I came from a farming background, blue collar. Dad worked third shift in the factory most of my childhood. And it was just interesting to hear that that's not how it is everywhere.
Yeah.
And to me, I was like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we be here
Absolutely.
early? So it's interesting to say that you see that as Decatur as a whole too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always been, kind of something that's, stuck with me about Decatur when I talk about Decatur. And, sometimes Decatur gets a bad reputation, and it's unfortunate because when I talk to those same people who might, say something negative about Decatur, I'm like, you have no idea,
Right.
You don't know what you're talking about. The people here are great. Yeah, maybe it's not as fancy as Bloomington or something like that, but I'd put the people at Decatur up against them any day.
Absolutely. And I think the blending of social classes too, the melting pot is kind of an overused word, but the moment when I said I wanted to do this podcast was I was at the lake, and there was a Hispanic couple that had a phone, and they were FaceTiming someone. And I'm a realtor, so I go up and talk to them, and they're like, we just moved from Iowa, and my cousin moved from Ohio to move here. We're trying to get his brother to move here too, because it's so beautiful here. And we're sitting on Lake Decatur too, and it was just like, here are these people, they've never even heard of Decatur, let alone hear about the things in the past or the bad raps or whatever. They don't care. They see it's beautiful, it's affordable, it's a welcoming community. It doesn't matter what your background is or what your social class is, you're welcome here.
Yeah, and that, again, that's probably a better way for me to, or maybe an additional add-in to that is that's And I've been to other communities where you just feel like an outsider or something like that. Or I don't know. And I just have never felt that way here. And so, I will always, no matter if I stay here after I retire, I don't know what life brings, down the road, but I mean, this is, what I refer to as my home.
So bringing those two together a little bit, the law enforcement community and the police force and the community, how do you view the connection between, protecting and serving and I don't know, law enforcement has a bad rap or the perspective is not as favorable as it was in the 90s when you were getting into the business, just proof in fact by how hard it is to get to recruits. There's so few people coming into law enforcement business now. How do you view that connection between community and law enforcement?
So it's interesting because the name Sir Robert Peel probably won't mean anything to you, but he is the father of what they call modern day policing. Yet this is a guy from the 1800s, late 1800s in England. And he had a phrase that said the community is the police and the police is the community. And it really was kind of that foundation of what is often deemed community policing, right? And you always get that question, what is community policing to you? And, what's that look like? And that's such a difficult question to ask and answer because it looks different to everybody, right? Everybody has their own thoughts and ideas. But what it honestly boils down to, it really is very, very simple in my mind, is that it is all about the partnership. You're doing it together. And it goes back to that phrase, the community is the police is the community. If you don't do it together, if you don't police your community together, you're going to suffer. You're going to struggle. You're not going to get the results that you want. And that, that sense of community for me and how it relates and interacts in policing is that. And so I, as a police chief, one of my larger roles is to try to build those relationships. And if there are any bridges that need repaired, that I try to repair those. We've struggled obviously over the last 4 years, post George Floyd, and really even back it up a little bit further, back to the Ferguson thing. And where really there was kind of a reckoning in the United States when it came to policing and what our country wanted it to look like. And I think that was a pause button, or should have been. And I think that's where maybe there was some struggles. Pause button for police leaders across the country at that time to go, okay, let's hit time out here. And let's start asking what the community wants out of the policing, because what I saw previous to that was the police put up a wall and said, this is how we're going to do it. And there wasn't a lot of that community-driven policing strategies out there. And so therefore, what you put up the wall, so what do you think you just did? You created a divide, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens then is things fester, even if it's a minor issue or a misperceived issue, which is what happened in Ferguson, which was a misperceived issue. But what happened there wasn't about that incident. It was a festering, right? Mm. And so, and that's typically what it is. It's never about one incident. It's about things that fester.
And then everybody builds their wall bigger. Yeah. They come with heavier.
Yeah. And then boom, something blows up. And so that's kind of what happened. And I think it took unfortunately, that between 2015 and 2020 was a little slow in that police reform. An interesting thing, and that I will, say I was a part of with the Decatur Police Department is, a lot of reform came in 2020 post George Floyd. The Decatur Police Department reformed ourselves before that. Everything that is in the Safety Act right now that was post George Floyd, we had implemented in the Decatur Police Department before that, in the couple of years leading up to that, because we felt this is the way policing is going. This is the way we need to move as a department. And so we were all prepped for it. So when Safety Act's going into effect, people are calling us, say, what are you going to do about this? Well, we're not doing anything because we've already done it. Our policy is already has outlined how it's going to be. It's already in line with that. Do you want a copy of it? And that's how we operated. Because I've always said, if I'm waiting to be told what to do, then I'm not doing my job.
Right.
I have to look ahead 5 years ahead, and what are the trends, and where do we need to be ahead of that? Because that's where your progressive and great police departments are at. They're ahead of that curve. They're not behind it or even riding the wave of the curve. They're ahead of it.
Right.
And so that's where we've always wanted to be. That's where I've always wanted to be. And since I've been the chief, I know I've flipped the cart, and some people didn't like it, so they got off the cart. Okay, that each to their own. But that's the way it needed to go for us to head in the right direction and continue to grow as a police department. And again, going back to that original thing, accept and understand what the community expects out of us, because they're the ones that need to drive what policing looks like in their community, period. And that looks different in every community. And I think that's hard too, because policing may look different in Champaign because that's the way their community wants it. You need to police the way your community wants it as well, within constitutional and legal guidelines, of course. But sometimes, other areas might want to do things differently, or they have different resources. So they're able to do things differently where we might not be able to, or we can do something on a different path, and this is what works for us.
Or different things to protect. You get into coastal areas where
you're
they got a boat fleet.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've noticed, in downtown Decatur, we have bike patrol. Or during certain events, there's bike patrol, and I think as a community, that is what the community wants. They just want that presence to be there, and I think for the most part among the community too, the community is also policing.
Yeah.
We're going, hey, I'm watching, I'm paying attention. I'll call if I need help too.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's important and is kind of different in law enforcement today is understanding, appreciating, and acting upon perceptions in the community, right? There may be a perception of, let's say, Arts in the Park, for example, that's coming up. Oh man, that might be dangerous. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not. It's not. But the perception's there, right? On some,
dangerous,
not everybody.
Because it's downtown?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying some may have that. Not everybody. I mean, there have been people that have told me, well, there's some elderly people that are afraid to come downtown for whatever reason. Okay. It's very safe. One of the safest parts of the city, as a matter of fact. But understand the perception. So if we're going to have larger events, I need to police understanding that perception. Hence why you might see bike patrol. Hence why you might see a surveillance trailer that might pop up and just has cameras. Why? Because it makes people feel better about it. They feel safe, and that drives your economy. Well, that's one thing I don't think people understand is policing has a direct impact on a local economy. If people don't feel safe, they won't go out and they won't spend money.
Right.
That matters.
Right.
So,
yep.
And so I think that's again another paradigm shift in policing and among police leadership is they have to understand and react to and act upon perceptions. Whereas in the past they would go, I'm not putting resources to that because that's absurd,
Right.
And it may be, but does that have an overall impact upon quality of life in your community? Yes, it does. So you should act upon it. And there's various ways you can do that. It's whether it's public messaging, whether it's community groups, neighborhood groups, organizations that you can go speak to, and I do a lot of that. But sometimes, and especially in our world today of constant 24-hour media source, social media, which is almost never factual, you have to address those things and combat those things. Whereas you didn't have that 20 years ago.
Right.
So, some of the challenges we face in policing today didn't exist 20 years ago, so we can't operate like we did 20 years ago.
Right. Speaking of something else that wasn't here 20 years ago was everybody having a camera in their hand or in their pocket. And from my view as a community member, I look at the body cameras, the dash cams, the footage. When certain things happen, that footage is released, I watch that because I want an understanding of what is being done to protect our community and to know what is happening and how certain things happened and occurred. I guess a question I have is, among the police and law enforcement, are body cameras something that are welcomed, appreciated? Like, is that like, hey, I got nothing to hide here?
Yes. So this has been an interesting...
And sorry if this is a touchy one.
No,
but,
this is not. This is actually a great topic, and I'm glad that you brought it up. It's a very interesting progression is a good way to maybe say it, of thought processes for body cameras. There's been in-car video for a long time in policing, and but never the body cams.
Mm-hmm.
And so body cams start, really being talked about more so, I don't know, roughly around 2015-ish or so. And there was massive opposition among police to do that. And I don't think it had anything to do with, I'm trying to cover something up. Imagine if you worked at anywhere else and you had to wear a camera that was recording everything that you did every day, all day long. Imagine how that would make you feel.
Yes.
That was what they felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was unfair in many ways for people to go, well, you should, why should you feel that way? If you're doing what you're supposed to do, then, okay, well, why don't you go wear a camera every day, all day long at your job? How do you like it?
Every time you go to the bathroom or yawn or something, it's on camera.
So
yeah,
it's like, that was the hesitation behind it. Not so much it's being recorded what's happening. What I will tell you has happened in the years since is we went to body cams, I think it was right at 2020, 2019-ish. And we actually had union opposition against it. Our union, high union leadership in Springfield, which are not DPD officers, their leaderships. I mean, they were mean about it and said really bad things, in my opinion, about it. It's like, listen, this is the way this is going. It's gonna be there.
Again, we're not riding the wave. We're trying to get ahead of the wave.
Eventually, it was mandated, right? And so we're way ahead of the mandate. And so we both know that in this day and age, these cameras are going to help us more than they hurt us. And so let's do a trial. So you had some of your young guys. I'll do it.
Sure.
So we trial it. Trial goes well. We roll it out. Any opposition that was there, to be quite frank, too bad. This is the way this is going. We're making the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But not sorry. And so body cams roll out. Now you won't get them to go on the street without a body cam. They want the body cams. Why? Because 99 times out of 100, it protects them.
Yes.
Because we have complaints that'll come in. It's so much easier for us to investigate complaints because it's just like, hit play.
Right.
This officer was rude to me and he called me a bad name. Play. That didn't happen. Done.
Right.
When I was a young sergeant and we had to investigate complaints without, sergeants generally are the first line investigators on complaints unless it's a very serious matter. We were easily investigating 60, 70 complaints a year. I just signed off on our most recent complaint and it was number 4 for the year.
Wow.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time it's demeanor, officer demeanor. And that's a hard one because so many people, it's crazy to me because so many people have this weird perception of they have an interaction with police officer. And I don't believe they're lying. I really don't. And because we see it so many times where somebody will say, I got pulled over for speeding and the officer was a real jerk. He did this, or he said X, Y, or Z. We watch the video. That didn't happen. And we're like, well, how about you come in and watch the video? And they'll come in and watch the video and they're like, I can't believe this. I 100% believe what I wrote in there. And I apologize and I rescind the complaint. We've had that happen many times.
Interesting.
And so I think that they're in a negative what they view as a negative interaction with police because it's an enforcement thing, whether, speed enforcement, maybe you arrested a friend of theirs or whatnot, they were present. And their perception of that interaction was bad. And their mind has now told them X, Y, or Z happened, and so they make a complaint. And again, these body cams have been great for us to show, not just to easily clear out complaints, but to show people your perception was wrong.
Right.
That didn't happen.
Right.
And that it actually is great for us in the community too, because I have those connections in the community where somebody might instead of coming to the police department to make a complaint, they go to, say, their pastor. And they make the issue with their pastor or the NAACP president. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, hey, this is what happened, X, Y, or Z. I've built those relationships where they just give me a call and say, hey, are we able to take a look at the video on this? Because they know the video is there. I said, yeah, let me take a look at it. Let me get a kind of a feel for what's going on, what happened, and I'll let you know. Because if we're wrong, I'll say it. Hey,
Right.
we were in the wrong in this. We made
Right.
a mistake. We'll fix it. Or, yep, the officer was inappropriate. It's being dealt with, discipline
Mm-hmm.
wise. But again, 99 times out of 100, they did what they were supposed to do. There was nothing wrong. And I say,
Right.
come on in and watch it. They come in and watch it. And that actually just happened to us last week. It was a use of force scenario. Somebody went to the pastor and said that excessive force was used. Because there was an injury in that case. It wasn't, an intentional injury. It's just a byproduct of force being used. That pastor come in, they watch the video, and they go, I got no problem with this. Those officers did what they had to do, and I'll deal with the family. Done.
And that is the community policing.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly an element of that. And it's about building the relationships and the trust with that community.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it looks different. What that looks like is you're gonna get a different answer from every person you ask. What is
Right.
community policing?
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about partnerships.
Yep.
And that's how I boil it down to.
Absolutely. Well, I want to hit just a few quick stats that we've looked at. And one thing that we saw was, the amount of reported crimes has really from that 19, 20, 21 era, which was an era in the world, is trending downward.
Yep.
Is that a nationwide trend? Is that a local trend? Is it the world's kind of calming down from that era? Or how are you attributing to that?
So I think it's a combination of all that. I mean, most urban cities saw the peak. The rise started in 2020 because the world went insane for various reasons. And then it just peaked in 2021. And urban cities across this country felt it. And then from there, it was a matter of, well, what are you doing as a city to address that? And so some entities fell flat for a while, and we immediately started to come down. And 2021 has been an absolute decline if you look at like our violent crimes and shootings and stuff.
Yep.
And a lot, and I would say I'm going to contribute a lot of that to the community. There's been a lot of community involvement. We have partnered with certain organizations, let's say Boys and Girls Club, Shamila Outreach, Old King's Orchard, Sister Girls, and I say this every time I go out, if you're expecting the police to solve the problem, you're going to be waiting a long time. This is not a police problem. This is a community problem. It starts at the home. It's in the schools. What are you doing as a neighbor? What are you doing as an aunt or a family member? Are you holding, your own family accountable and stuff? And so I think when enough bad things started to happen, then now we're going to step up. So you have the community stepping up. The police department, we changed up our operations significantly since 2021. Our patrol division doesn't look near what it did. The shifts that we work, how we target violent offenders is our strategy with that has been flipped completely upside down from what it was, early on in my career to I call it, the term I've used it is precision policing, where I know where this violent crime's happening. So instead of just going an entire neighborhood, I'm going to go to that block. I know who our shooters are. So instead of just going into an area that I know is more prone to violence and just stopping everybody, I'm only going to stop them. Or the people they're associated with and stuff like that. And that has contributed significantly to our the drop in violent crime. We've also seen a drop in property crimes, and burglaries and stuff have went down. At the same time,
which is a community policing.
Absolutely it is. We've listened to the community because outside of violent crime, the number one concern in our community is traffic safety. And so last year, we bumped up our traffic safety for speed enforcement, cell phone enforcement, red light violations. And I think we wrote more speeding tickets than we'd ever written, at least in that I have data for. And we've continued that trend this year. And last year, we had the fewest number of traffic crashes that we have had on record. And I can only go back 16 years. With the exception of 2020, you have to cross that out because of homework and, people working from home. And
Nobody
all that.
was driving then.
Correct.
Yeah.
The lowest number of traffic crashes that we've had ever in recorded history. This year we're trending on the same path to go even and break that from last year.
Good.
And
Good.
so that, again, listening to our community, this is what's important to them. Now, the perception is it's crazy out there and you can't go out there and be in a crash. But yet I just told you we had the lowest number of traffic crashes in
Right.
recorded history.
Right.
So that is
Yeah.
a tough battle that we fight every day, is the perception versus reality.
Yeah. Good.
And so, but regardless of that, you know, we're going to listen and we're going to pay attention. We're going to react upon that and act upon that, not necessarily react. I say that because I don't want to react to every situation. I want to recognize it, see the trend, understand it, and then be proactive in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, stay ahead of that curve.
Yep.
If I'm seeing something bubble up before it becomes a problem, I want to put it down so it doesn't become a problem.
Yep. So in the interest of staying ahead of the curve and to kind of wrap up too, what do you see for the future of Decatur from a law enforcement standpoint, but also just Decatur as a community? What do you see? What's happening? What's the undercurrent? What's the positives? Where do you see the community going in the future?
So I think a lot of that is interrelated, because, you know, how what's it look like for policing? What's it look like for the city? Because I see, for really, to be fair and honest and blunt, in one of the first times in my career and my time here in Decatur actually growing, right? The opportunities that are coming to Decatur with all the stuff that's happening out on the east side with ADM and Permanent and some of the new factories and facilities that are coming in, that hasn't happened. In the past, you just saw Firestone close. All those jobs are gone.
Right.
You know, some of the other factories close, gone. Well, now they're coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And those opportunities then, I hope, will bring people in again, and we will see a rebound on our population. And that is a great thing for Decatur. And that also has a great a positive impact with policing, you know, because most people will acknowledge and say that poverty, joblessness are a significant driver of crime. And so if you can help, you know, I wouldn't say eliminate that, because I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But if you can help bring change to that in a positive way, then that's only going to make things a little bit better. And so I am very, very excited to see what Decatur looks like 20 years from now, because, I mean, it's not going to just happen overnight. But again, it's trending in that right direction. And so I'm excited about that. What do I see about in terms of the future of the department? This is what's very interesting. About 50% of our department has 5 years or less of experience on right now. So our biggest challenge is dealing with that inexperience.
A lot of 21 and 22-year-olds down there, huh?
Well, actually, I'll say that there's a lot of, you know, people with some life, you know, 28, 29, 30 years old coming into it.
Okay.
You know, career change. You know, they've always wanted to do it, but maybe they didn't have the opportunity before. So we are getting a lot of that, but they still are inexperienced.
Right. And
it takes time for an officer to really feel comfortable in that position, because there's a lot that you got to know, a lot you got to do, decisions you got to make now. You know, I always say it's real easy to make a decision as a lawyer when you get to analyze it for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. You're good for you. Now do it in about 2 seconds.
Right.
Right? Because if you don't do it in 2 seconds, I'm going to punch you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Right? So go use some of these simulators that we use, and you watch how many bad decisions you make, because you're not used to that stress. You're not used to having to make that decision right now. We have a virtual machine. It's a simulator. Okay, this is what happened. This is what you did, all the mistakes you just made. Now I want you to put yourselves in a position to where the consequences are real. You just made the mistake and now you're dead. You just made that mistake and now you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. Can you now understand how difficult it is for police officers under real time, real stress, real life and or death situations? They're not going to be perfect. They will make mistakes at times, and you have to be understanding of that. You're talking about a human being, not a robot.
Mm-hmm. Again, when you talk about divorce rate and alcoholism, and I know back in the day, it would be if you saw something really tough and really traumatic, I'm sure if you came back to the shop, they'd go, move on, next shift. How is,
Yeah.
is that common how it was, and how is it now?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started, that's exactly how it was, and it was almost like an unwritten thing. It was just something you had to learn to deal with. And what's hard is, and even as you fast forward to today, is not everybody has the same reactions to everything, right? There may be a personal trauma that they've suffered in their life that then a particular call they go on just triggered that trauma. And so they'll struggle with that call mentally, but nobody else that was on it would, right?
And
so
maybe not even notice.
and not even know, and not be an issue, right? So it's always very difficult to identify those specific incidents. Now you have your ones that are usually universal. Trauma, abuse, significant abuse to children is usually pretty difficult. That was always the thing. And really, I hate to say it, one of the only things that probably really affected me. I don't know why. Sometimes I question myself on my own thoughts, and I guess of why was I never affected the way some people are. I don't know. Everybody is different. But when I mentioned, it's well known in policing with the high suicide rates, high divorce rates, high alcoholism rates. It all goes back to what I talked about on how you deal with that mental trauma and the stuff that police officers have to deal with every day. It's that death by 1,000 cuts. It's not the one incident. It's the accumulation of that over time and the constant repeated exposure to things that most people will never, ever see in their lives, let alone experience it multiple times. And so that's what it contributes to. And then that not having a healthy outlet when they need it. And so what's transformed in recent years, same with the Decatur Police Department, is the recognition and understanding of the importance of mental health among our police officers. I think that we've had an assistance because we have such a young department, and that has been more common to talk about mental health. It's not that stigma anymore that it used to be. So, new officers coming in, I sit down with every single one of them and say, it's okay to not be okay. If you need to talk about something, talk about it. We have a peer support group. So other fellow officers that are trained in peer support for this very issue. We also have a staff counselor that deals solely with our officers and first responders when it comes to this sort of trauma, mental trauma that they deal with, so they can address it and deal with it in a healthy way rather than resort to some of those unhealthy habits of the past. And I know it's being used. The counselor tells me, I'm seeing a lot of people. It's good, not in a negative thing. So I'm glad that they're coming. And so when I talk to the shifts and I talk to the officers, I always reiterate, it's okay to not be okay. You need to talk about these things, and whatever it is that helps you, do it. Right? Again, it's different for everybody. That whatever that healthy outlet is different for everybody, and whatever that trigger is different for everybody. And some people might not need to talk to a counselor. They just need to talk to their spouse, rather than keep it in. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is when you keep it in, eventually it's going to come out, and it'll come out in a negative way, in an unhealthy way. So the constant encouragement in law enforcement today, and you're really seeing this, trend nationwide for the most part, at least I hope so, and in most agencies, that, you got to focus on your own mental health. Otherwise, you're going to struggle in your life.
Right. I think the phrase of, you can't bring it home with you.
Yeah.
You just leave it at the office.
That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
No.
You can't do that.
No, you can't do that.
You'll go home and bury it in beer in the garage.
Absolutely.
It's still with you, though.
Yeah. And the thing is, and you can't ever, there's certain things you just can't put away, right? You want to say, you want to file it in the back of your head and never think about it again. Well, that doesn't happen, right? Mm-hmm. There are incidents in the course of my career that I just can't get out of my head. And I understand that, and I've accepted that. It's just a matter of how you deal with it in a healthy way versus, a not so healthy way, and whatever that, may be. And that's just, for your own, not only mental health, but, for a positive direction in your own life, the relationships you have with your spouse, your kids, your friends, and how you interact with people in general. I mean, that really has a significant impact if you don't manage that properly, because the issue, it's not about will you have those mental traumas, because you will. If you do this job long enough, it's there. It's just about, are you able to manage it, in a positive way?
Mm-hmm. And wife, kids, family, but like maybe that carries over to your next interaction with the community.
And that's you're exactly right. And then
maybe
that does
some of
happen.
those things that weren't dealt with are what have led to.
Yeah, and not only that, but we try to tell our officers, listen, if you are on a call and something is triggering you and you're not right, take yourself offline. Talk to the supervisor. Let them know, I'm not okay with this. Take yourself offline, because if you go to that next call and something goes bad and that trigger was right back here, it's not going to go good for anybody. So it's okay to say, time out.
Right.
I need a timeout. And so the constant reaffirmation of that among not just me, but all the leadership, and then amongst each other, that's how you change that culture, and that's how you get to, a better place. It's never going to go away. And I don't think people, maybe understand that. And sometimes cops want to say, yeah, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm telling you right now, it's you're going to think about it, whether, it manifests itself just through a weird memory, a smell. There's certain smells right now that will take me right back to certain things. So it's like, you just got to learn how to deal with that in a positive way. So as we move into the future, I think that you're going to see a lot of technology being brought into. In the last 4 years, I've brought more technology into the Decatur Police Department than probably had ever been brought in the previous 20 that I've been there, 20 some years. And that's not because, I did anything different. It's just because that's how much technology is advancing, and that's how much technology is becoming important and integrated into our field. And so that's only going to keep getting, bigger and bigger. And I think that's going to be interesting. And so why I said, I talked about, an interesting part of the, department being 50% less than 5 years. They're good with technology.
Yeah.
What I will say is old cops are not good with technology, and they don't like technology.
So that's a good thing to have all those newbies.
Some of that transition is a good thing, and it's helping us out. So
good. Well, very good. Hey, appreciate your time
so
much. This was very enlightening. We're very excited to be able to share this with the community too. Appreciate your service personally. We know personally sacrifices from your family, your wife, your twins. That's important, but obviously you come from a family of serving, but appreciate your service on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. That was another episode of The Main Points. That was certainly a great conversation. What I loved was when Shane talked about community policing, and he actually quoted Sir Robert Peel, who said, "The community is the police, and the police are the community." And much of that conversation tied back to how the community is representing the police and how the police count on the community to help them with their job.